The cabin of the sleek international airliner buzzed with activity as passengers boarded for the 12-hour flight from Los Angeles to Manila. The luxurious first-class section was a haven of comfort, complete with plush leather seats that reclined into beds, personalized service, and gourmet meals. Among the passengers settling into their seats were a mix of high-powered business people, wealthy tourists, and seasoned travelers. In the midst of this elite crowd, Maria Santos, a petite Filipina flight attendant, moved gracefully through the aisle. Her uniform was crisp and perfectly fitted, her hair neatly pinned back, and her warm smile radiated a genuine kindness. Maria's appearance, though polished, lacked the ostentatious flair of some of her colleagues. She didn't wear heavy makeup or designer jewelry, and her demeanor was quiet but attentive. As she approached row 2, her smile faltered slightly. Sitting there was Mr. Jonathan Williams, a well-known executive in the tech industry. With his tailored suit and diamond-encrusted watch, he exuded the arrogance of someone used to getting his way. Next to him sat his wife, draped in a scarf that probably cost as much as Maria's monthly salary. Across the aisle was their teenage son, who was already complaining about the in-flight Wi-Fi. Maria greeted them warmly. "Good afternoon, sir. Ma'am, welcome aboard. Can I assist you with your luggage or anything else before takeoff?" Mr. Williams barely glanced up from his phone. "Yes, you can start by bringing me a proper drink. Champagne, the best you have. And make it quick," he said, his tone sharp. Maria nodded. "Of course, sir. I'll have that for you shortly." As she turned to leave, Mrs. Williams leaned toward her husband and whispered loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "Does she even speak proper English? It's always the same with these flights. Can't they hire someone more professional?" Maria overheard the comment but chose not to react. Years of experience had taught her to maintain her composure, no matter how rude a passenger might be. She returned moments later with a perfectly chilled glass of champagne, setting it down with practiced precision. "There you are, sir. If there's anything else you need, just let me know." Instead of a thank you, Mr. Williams held up the glass, inspecting it as though he'd been served a cheap knockoff. "Is this really the best you have? I expected something more refined in first class," he scoffed. Maria maintained her calm demeanor. "Yes, sir. This is one of our finest selections. If you'd like, I can bring the wine list for you to choose from." Before Mr. Williams could respond, his son chimed in. "Dad, look at this plane. It's like they cut corners everywhere, even the staff. No offense," he added, glancing at Maria with a smirk that implied the exact opposite. Maria's heart sank, but she refused to let their words affect her. "I'll be back shortly to take your dinner orders," she said, retreating to the galley. As she moved to assist other passengers, Maria could still feel their judgmental eyes following her. She overheard snippets of their conversation, remarks about her accent, her height, and even her appearance. "She doesn't look like she belongs here," Mrs. Williams whispered, her voice dripping with disdain. "I mean, look at her shoes. Probably from a bargain bin somewhere." Her husband chuckled. "Well, what do you expect? Not everyone can keep up with our standards." Nearby passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances but said nothing. Maria, meanwhile, continued to work diligently, refusing to let the insults distract her from her duties. She ensured that every passenger, including the Williams family, received impeccable service. By the time the flight took off, the Williamses had shifted their focus to nitpicking every aspect of the experience. The seats weren't soft enough, the menus weren't extensive enough, and the service, especially from Maria, was, in their words, mediocre at best. As Maria passed by with a tray of appetizers, Mrs. Williams stopped her with a snap of her fingers. "Excuse me," she said, her tone icy. "What is this supposed to be?" "It's a selection of hors d'oeuvres, ma'am," Maria replied patiently. "We have smoked salmon, caviar, and a vegetarian option. Would you like me to explain them in detail?" Mrs. Williams wrinkled her nose. "I think I'll pass. Honestly, it looks like something they'd serve in economy class. Do you have anything better?" Maria's colleague, a younger flight attendant named Anna, overheard the exchange and stepped in, I can check with the kitchen for alternative options, ma'am, Anna offered. But Mrs. Williams waved her off. Don't bother. Just bring me a glass of wine, red, but not too dry. As Anna walked away, Mr. Williams leaned back in his seat and muttered, "This is what happens when you hire people who don't know what they're doing. Probably just hired her because she's cheap labor." Maria felt a pang of anger rise within her chest, but she quickly pushed it down. She reminded herself that these passengers didn't know her story. They didn't know that she had started her career as a flight attendant nearly 2 decades ago, working tirelessly to support her family and eventually climbing the ranks within the airline. They didn't know that she was now the CEO of the very airline they were flying with, choosing to work incognito as part of an initiative to better understand the passenger experience. As the flight progressed, Maria continued to endure the Williams family's relentless complaints and condescension. At one point, Mr. Williams even called over the purser to lodge a formal complaint about Maria, accusing her of being unfit for first-class service. The purser, who was aware of Maria's true identity, managed to keep a straight face as he assured Mr. Williams that his concerns would be addressed. Meanwhile, other passengers began to take notice of Maria's grace under pressure. One older gentleman seated in row 3 caught her attention as she walked past. "You're handling yourself well," he said quietly. "Don't let them get to you." Maria offered him a small smile. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that." As the flight continued, Maria couldn't help but reflect on the irony of the situation. She had built this airline from the ground up, ensuring that every detail, from the menu to the service, met the highest standards. And yet, here she was, being criticized by people who had no idea of her role in creating the very experience they were enjoying. Little did the Williams family know, their behavior was about to come back to haunt them. As the flight reached cruising altitude, the hum of the engines provided a steady backdrop to the bustling activity in the first-class cabin. Passengers were settling in, many engrossed in their tablets or sipping on their beverages. Yet, the Williams family was far from content. Maria Santos continued her rounds, delivering drinks, adjusting seat configurations, and ensuring the passengers' comfort. Despite the relentless jabs and criticisms from the Williamses, she carried herself with grace and poise. Her colleagues occasionally glanced her way, silently offering their support, but Maria never wavered. Her professional demeanor was a shield, deflecting the negativity directed at her. "Excuse me, miss," Mrs. Williams called out, waving her hand with exaggerated impatience. Maria approached her seat calmly. "Yes, ma'am. How can I assist you?" Mrs. Williams held up the menu as though it were an offensive piece of literature. "This menu is uninspired. Don't you have anything better? Proper filet mignon, perhaps? Or a lobster tail? I thought first-class passengers were supposed to get the best." Maria smiled politely. "Our menu is curated to provide a range of options. While we don't have lobster, our chef recommends the seared salmon or the lamb chops, which are popular choices among our passengers." Mrs. Williams sneered. "I suppose it will have to do, but make sure it's cooked properly. I won't tolerate anything less than perfection." "Of course, ma'am. I'll convey your preferences to the chef," Maria replied, jotting down the order. As Maria turned to leave, she caught the amused smirk of Mr. Williams. He leaned toward his wife, muttering just loud enough for Maria to hear, "It's always the same with these types. They act polite, but you know they're not really listening." Maria didn't react. Instead, she walked away, her head held high. Back in the galley, Anna, her colleague, couldn't hold back any longer. "Maria, how are you staying so calm? Those people are insufferable." Maria gave her a reassuring smile. "It's just part of the job. Not everyone appreciates the work we do." Anna shook her head. "Still, the way they talk to you, it's disgusting. I don't know how you put up with it." Maria's smile widened slightly, her eyes twinkling with a secret she wasn't ready to share. "Patience, Anna. People reveal their true selves over time." As Anna walked away to attend to another passenger, Maria checked her watch. She had planned every detail of this flight, from the menu selections to the staff rotations, to ensure everything went smoothly. This wasn't just another day at work for her. It was part of a larger mission to reconnect with the very roots of the airline she now led. Meanwhile, the Williams family continued to complain about every minor inconvenience. "Why is the Wi-Fi so slow?" Mr. Williams barked at Maria as she passed by. "I'll check with our technical team, sir," she replied, making a mental note to ensure the issue was addressed promptly. As Maria disappeared into the galley, Mr. Williams turned to his wife. "This airline is a joke. I'm going to file a complaint as soon as we land. Someone needs to know how poorly this place is run." Their son, who had been scrolling on his phone, added, "Yeah, Dad, maybe you should buy the airline. Then we could actually fly in style." Other passengers in the first-class cabin began to exchange glances, their discomfort with the Williams family's behavior becoming more evident. A few even whispered to each other, expressing their admiration for Maria's ability to stay calm under pressure. One passenger, an elderly gentleman seated in row 3, couldn't resist commenting. "You know," he said, leaning slightly toward Mr. Williams, "perhaps you should give that young lady a bit more credit. She's doing an excellent job." Mr. Williams scoffed. "Spare me the lecture. We paid for first class and we're entitled to first-class service. If she can't handle it, she shouldn't be here." The elderly gentleman shook his head but said no more, choosing instead to sip his wine and return to his book. As the flight progressed, Maria continued to interact with all the passengers, her professionalism unwavering. However, there was something different about the way she carried herself. While she maintained her role as a flight attendant, there were subtle hints that she wasn't an ordinary member of the crew. She exchanged occasional glances with the captain, who seemed to treat her with an unusual level of deference. The purser, too, appeared to consult her on decisions that would normally be outside a flight attendant's purview. "Maria," the purser said quietly during a moment in the galley, "are you sure you want to continue this? We could step in if needed." Maria shook her head. "No, it's fine. Let's see how the rest of the flight plays out. I want to experience this as fully as possible." The purser nodded, respecting her decision. As the flight neared its midpoint, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're enjoying your flight. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge a very special guest on board today. Someone who has played a significant role in making this airline what it is today. More details will be shared as we approach our destination. But for now, please join me in thanking our incredible crew for their hard work and dedication." The announcement sparked murmurs throughout the cabin. Passengers began to speculate about who the special guest might be. "Probably some celebrity," one passenger whispered. "Maybe a top executive," said another. The Williams family, however, remained oblivious. Mr. Williams leaned back in his seat, dismissing the announcement entirely. "Who cares? It doesn't change the fact that this airline is a mess." Despite the mounting tension and the mystery surrounding the captain's announcement, Maria continued to perform her duties with grace. At one point, she stopped by row 2 to check on the Williams family. "Is everything to your satisfaction, sir?" she asked. Mr. Williams rolled his eyes. "Barely, but I suppose you've done the best you could, given your limitations." Maria's smile didn't falter. "Thank you for your feedback, sir. If there's anything else I can do to improve your experience, please let me know." As she walked away, Mr. Williams muttered under his breath, "Unbelievable." But Maria wasn't focused on his words. She was focused on what lay ahead, the moment when the truth would be revealed, and the Williams family would have to confront the consequences of their actions. By the time dinner service began, the mood in the cabin had shifted. Passengers were more attentive to Maria, recognizing the effort she put into her work. Some even began to engage her in conversation, asking about her experiences as a flight attendant. Maria answered their questions politely but kept her responses brief. She didn't want to overshadow the other crew members or draw too much attention to herself just yet. As the flight continued, the anticipation for the captain's promised revelation grew. Little did the Williams family know, they were about to learn a lesson in humility that they would never forget. The flight cabin buzzed with low murmurs as the anticipation from the captain's earlier announcement grew. Passengers in the first-class section speculated about who the special guest might be. The Williams family, however, remained preoccupied with their complaints. Their lack of self-awareness painted them as the most oblivious people on board. Maria continued her rounds, maintaining her professional demeanor. But those who paid close attention noticed a subtle shift. There was something almost regal about the way she moved. A quiet confidence that suggested she wasn't just another flight attendant. As dinner service concluded, the cabin lights dimmed slightly, signaling the beginning of the in-flight entertainment portion. But the passengers weren't focused on their screens. The captain's cryptic announcement still lingered in the air, fueling curiosity. "Excuse me, miss?" The elderly gentleman from row 3 called Maria over. "Yes, sir," Maria responded warmly. "I don't mean to pry, but do you happen to know who this special guest might be?" Maria smiled politely. "I'm afraid you'll have to wait just a little longer, sir. But I assure you, it will all make sense soon enough." The gentleman nodded, his curiosity piqued even further. Meanwhile, Mrs. Williams had overheard the exchange. She leaned toward her husband, whispering loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "Honestly, what's the big deal? Probably some overpaid executive here for a free ride." Her husband chuckled. "Or some celebrity looking for attention. Either way, it's not worth the fuss." Their son added, "Whoever it is, I hope they do something about this terrible Wi-Fi." The nearby passengers exchanged awkward glances, clearly uncomfortable with the Williams family's behavior. But Maria carried on as though nothing had happened. With about 2 hours left in the flight, the captain's voice came over the intercom once again. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take a moment to thank you for flying with us today. As I mentioned earlier, we have a very special guest on board, a person whose contributions to this airline have been instrumental in shaping its success. I would now like to invite this individual to address the cabin." The cabin fell silent. Heads turned, searching for clues. Who could it be? To everyone's surprise, Maria set down her tray and walked to the front of the cabin. She stood poised and confident, the faint hum of the engines underscoring the weight of the moment. Passengers began to whisper among themselves. "Wait, is it her? Why would a flight attendant be the special guest? This doesn't make any sense." The Williams family exchanged confused glances. Mrs. Williams scoffed. "What is she doing? This is ridiculous." Maria took a deep breath, her calm gaze sweeping across the cabin. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Maria Santos, and I want to personally thank you for flying with us today. For those who may not know, I am the CEO of this airline." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Passengers stared at her, stunned, as the realization sank in. Maria continued, her voice steady and warm. "I started my career as a flight attendant many years ago. It was my first job out of college, and it taught me the value of hard work, teamwork, and treating people with respect. Values that I carry with me to this day." The passengers began to applaud, their admiration for Maria growing with every word. Maria gestured for them to quiet down. "As the CEO, I believe it's important to understand the experiences of our crew and our passengers. That's why I occasionally take on the role of a flight attendant, to stay connected to the heart of our operations and to ensure that we're living up to the standards we set for ourselves." Her words resonated with most of the cabin, but the Williams family sat frozen in their seats, their faces a mixture of disbelief and embarrassment. As the applause died down, Maria turned her attention to the Williams family. "Now, I'd like to address something that happened during this flight," she said, her tone firm but not accusatory. Mrs. Williams shifted uncomfortably. "What is this about?" she whispered to her husband, who looked equally uneasy. Maria took a step closer to their row. "Throughout this flight, I've observed behaviors that don't align with the values we hold dear at this airline: respect, kindness, and understanding. Unfortunately, some passengers have treated our crew with a lack of dignity and appreciation." The cabin grew eerily quiet. All eyes were on the Williams family, who were now visibly squirming in their seats. "I want to remind everyone," Maria continued, "that every member of our crew works tirelessly to ensure your safety and comfort. They deserve to be treated with respect, regardless of their role. Mr. Williams tried to interject. Look, if this is about us, I think there's been some misunderstanding. Maria held up a hand, silencing him. There's no misunderstanding, sir. I'm referring to the comments and complaints directed at me and my colleagues throughout this flight. Mrs. Williams' face turned crimson. Well, we didn't realize. Maria cut her off gently but firmly. It shouldn't matter who I am. Respect is a basic courtesy we should extend to everyone. The passengers began to murmur among themselves, their disapproval of the Williams family's behavior evident. One man from row 5 spoke up. She's right. You've been rude this entire flight. You owe her an apology. Another passenger added, it's about time someone called you out. The Williams family was now the center of attention, their earlier arrogance replaced by a palpable sense of shame. Maria, however, wasn't looking to humiliate them. She offered them a gracious way out. I believe in second chances. If there's anything you'd like to say, now would be the time. Mrs. Williams, her voice barely above a whisper, said, We're sorry. We didn't mean to offend anyone. Her husband nodded reluctantly. Yes, we apologize. It won't happen again. Maria smiled warmly. Thank you. Apologies are the first step toward understanding. As Maria returned to her seat, the cabin erupted in applause. Passengers cheered, their admiration for her not just as a CEO, but as a person, shining through. The elderly gentleman in row 3 raised his glass. To Maria Santos, a true leader, the applause continued, and even the Williams family clapped hesitantly, hoping to blend in with the crowd. For the remainder of the flight, the atmosphere in the cabin was noticeably lighter. Passengers engaged in friendly conversations, and the crew worked with renewed energy, inspired by Maria's example. Maria, ever humble, returned to her role as a flight attendant, assisting with final preparations for landing. But to everyone on that flight, she was more than just a CEO. She was a living testament to the power of kindness, humility, and leading by example. The flight began its descent, and the earlier drama seemed to linger in the air like the fading turbulence from a storm. Maria sat in her jump seat, her calm expression masking the whirlwind of emotions she felt inside. She had been in countless boardrooms and had led numerous shareholder meetings, but today had tested her resolve in a way she hadn't anticipated. Her actions had not only demonstrated her principles, but also provided an important lesson in humility and respect. A lesson she hoped the Williams family and everyone on board would take to heart. As the plane glided smoothly through the clouds, the Williams family sat unusually quiet in their seats. Gone were their haughty remarks and loud complaints. Their earlier mockery of the flight attendant had backfired spectacularly, leaving them embarrassed and introspective. The other passengers, meanwhile, couldn't stop sneaking glances at Maria. The elderly gentleman in row 3 leaned over to a younger man beside him. Now that's what you call class. She didn't have to do what she did, but the way she handled herself? Impressive. The younger man nodded. She could have humiliated them further, but she chose not to. That's real leadership. These murmurs of admiration spread throughout the cabin, creating a newfound sense of camaraderie among the passengers. People began smiling at the crew members, thanking them for their service, and engaging in genuine conversations. It was as though Maria's actions had reminded everyone on board of the importance of decency and kindness. Unable to bear the weight of silence any longer, Mrs. Williams turned to her husband. "Do you think we went too far?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Mr. Williams sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "It's not about whether we went too far, Karen. It's about how blind we were. All that complaining, all that arrogance. We didn't know who she was," Karen interrupted, her tone defensive. "That's the point," Mr. Williams replied, his voice firmer now. "It shouldn't have mattered who she was. Whether she's a flight attendant, a CEO, or anyone else, we had no right to treat her or anyone like that." Their son, who had been quietly scrolling on his tablet, finally chimed in. "Yeah, I guess it was kind of messed up." He looked up sheepishly. "She didn't even look mad when she called us out. Just disappointed. Karen looked down at her hands, her usual bravado replaced by a rare vulnerability. "We need to do better," she said softly. As the plane touched down, Maria returned to her duties, helping passengers prepare for disembarkation. Her colleagues couldn't hide their admiration for her, and even the passengers seemed eager to express their gratitude. The elderly gentleman in row 3 was among the first to approach her. "Ms. Santos, I just wanted to say thank you, not just for the flight, but for reminding us all of what really matters." Maria smiled warmly. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot to me." Several others echoed similar sentiments, their words of appreciation reaffirming Maria's belief in the power of leading by example. Finally, it was the Williams family's turn to leave the plane. They hesitated as they approached Maria, their earlier arrogance replaced by an awkward humility. Karen spoke first, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "Ms. Santos, we just wanted to say we're sorry for everything." Maria looked at them, her expression kind but unreadable. "Thank you for your apology," she said. "I hope this experience serves as a reminder that kindness and respect cost nothing but mean everything." Mr. Williams extended a hand. "You're an exceptional leader, Ms. Santos. Thank you for showing us the way." Maria shook his hand, her grip firm. Leadership isn't about titles or power. It's about responsibility. To your team, to your community, and to yourself. Their son, avoiding eye contact, muttered, "Thanks for not, throwing us off the plane or something." Maria chuckled lightly. "Everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes. Have a safe journey home." The family left the plane, their steps slower, their demeanor quieter. It was clear that Maria's words had left a lasting impression. As the last passengers disembarked, Maria and her crew began their post-flight routines. Her colleagues couldn't stop expressing their admiration. "Maria, I had no idea you'd pull something like that," one of the flight attendants said, shaking her head in awe. "You handled it so gracefully." Maria shrugged modestly. "It wasn't about me. It was about setting an example. For them, for us, and for anyone who witnessed it." The captain approached, a broad smile on his face. "Maria, you've raised the bar for all of us. I don't think anyone will forget this flight anytime soon." Maria smiled, a hint of exhaustion creeping into her features. "Let's just hope it inspires some lasting change." Later that evening, Maria reflected on the day's events. She drafted a post for the airline's social media page, sharing the story of the flight, not to boast, but to spread the message of respect, humility, and the importance of valuing every individual's contributions. She ended her post with a heartfelt message. "To all our passengers, crew members, and everyone in the airline industry, let's strive to treat each other with the kindness and respect we all deserve. It's the little moments that define us, and together, we can create a world where empathy and understanding take flight." The post went viral, sparking conversations around the globe. People from all walks of life shared their own stories of kindness and humility, inspired by Maria's actions. Maria's journey from flight attendant to CEO wasn't just a testament to her determination, but also a reminder of the values she held dear. Her ability to bridge the gap between leadership and service had left an indelible mark on everyone she encountered. And for those who witnessed her grace and poise that day, whether in person or through her viral post, Maria Santos would forever be remembered as the leader who showed the world the true meaning of respect and humility. Finally, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of leadership, resilience, and humanity. Let's keep spreading positivity together.